If you ever hear the children's nursery song, "We're Going on a Bear Hunt," I don't know if you're familiar. It's kind of like where you kind of echo back and forth, "We're going on a bear hunt," and then they respond, "We're going on a bear hunt." It kind of follows them throughout an adventure of sorts. The song kind of goes through these different areas and adventures, and there's always an obstacle in the way, and every time they get to an obstacle, they repeat that phrase, "Can't go over it, can't go around it, can't go under it, got to go through it, or across it," or whatever the obstacle happens to be. Well, here we have this problem of evil, this big obstacle that you just cannot deny is there in our world. And you wonder what kind of prepositions are appropriate when it comes to God's approach to that problem of evil. Sometimes we think of God as being just kind of hovering above evil or shying away from evil. And yet, we find out that that's just not true. Christmas is proof. Christmas is not just about the warm and fuzzy feelings of the holiday. Christmas shows that we have a God and a Savior who is not afraid to go straight into the evil. That's what we're looking at today in Matthew chapter 2. Jesus going straight into the evil, being born into a world and in a time when evil men were in charge. Specifically, in this case, a man named Herod, who we could use air quotes when we call him King Herod, because if you would have asked the average person, they would have told you that Caesar is king. Herod was kind of middle management that they let be in charge of Judea for a while. But oh, did that little bit of power go to his head. Anytime that there was any whisper of a threat to his rule, someone wanting to take his throne, he would take their life. Didn't matter who it was. No questions asked. Over the course of his rule, he put to death members of his own family, including his own mother, his wife, 2 of his sons, his father-in-law. Anyone who even looked at him funny could have been put to death for treason. He was violent and he was evil. So when the Magi showed up looking for the one who was born King of the Jews, Herod had already decided in his heart that he was going to kill whoever it was that was posing this threat, even if it was a little baby. Then when the Magi left the palace and they visited the child in Bethlehem, rather than going back to Jerusalem, to Herod's palace like they said they would, they went back home a different way. And that's when we read in Matthew chapter 2 that when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time that he had learned from the Magi. Just pure evil. Historians estimate that Bethlehem had a population of about 500 people. It wasn't a booming metropolis, just a little village outside of Jerusalem. And so when you think about it, you wonder how many boys would have fit that description, being 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem. Figure that they skewed a little younger back then because of age expectancy and whatnot. So how many boys are we talking about here? Maybe a dozen? 20? 30? It wasn't a massacre on a large scale, and yet it's a tragedy nonetheless, because not one of those children deserved to die. But Herod didn't care. Just pure evil indeed. Jesus, as an adult, showed his love for babies and for children when he said, "Let those little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." It must have broken his heart to know that such an evil exists, that a madman would put these children to death as they searched for him. And yet, Jesus was also one step ahead of that evil. Herod's goal was to put this newborn king of the Jews to death. His goal was to kill Jesus. And yet, in the end, he was unsuccessful.